Hello, this is Truth Be Told Transformation, and I'm your host, Bonnie Burkert. I'm here to share tools for transformation to live your highest truth. And I always like to kind of ask and challenge you to think, what's true for you? So one of the paths that is very true for me is ritual. And that ritual can look like something that we do around holidays, or it can be something that we do to celebrate a wish, an intention, right? What's the ritual around a birthday? We blow out a birthday candle. So today I'd like to invite Devin Hunter to join us. Devin is a witch who is also an author of quite a few books. I know him through the Llewellyn series. And Devin, let's talk about witchcraft and really what kind of tools we can use to help manifest our dreams and desires.
Yeah, I mean, honestly, witchcraft can look like just about anything. It can smell like just about anything. It can taste like just about anything. So I think ultimately the tools that are the most useful are the tools that are going to be the most accessible to you. And a lot of the times people are surprised, but you can tap into the world of magic with just about anything sitting around your home. So, especially in folk magic, we really celebrate the ease and the access that magic tends to have that people might be surprised about. So, if we're talking about tools that you need, what do you got?
That's great. And big part of that is just your spirit, right? And your intention and what you bring to it. So I'd like to ask, how did this all start for you? Let's take it back to your early days as a young practitioner.
Actually, well, so I am a psychic medium. That is how all of this started for me. I was a little psychic boy with lots of weird experiences, and the spiritual environment that I was in at the time, while my parents were very awesome with asking me questions about what I was experiencing and asking me you follow up things, to make sure that I was safe and I was feeling okay with what I was experiencing. Still pretty limited amount of vocabulary and a limited amount of just understanding. And so I sought out the occult really pretty young is because I was looking for answers. I mean, it was really just that simple. I knew that witches were supposed to take care of ghosts if there were ghost problems, and witches were going to protect you because I'd seen that and I'd read that in the stories. And that how many heroes and stories go to a witch to get something to help them along their journey. So that was that was really the introduction, was looking for ways to better just cope with being a psychic in a very raw environment, and especially having spiritual experiences and spirits coming to me. Then it just kind of evolved, because then I stuck around and I was like, hey, there's some cool stuff here. And I started looking for ways to spiritually enrich myself, which, believe it or not, witchcraft is full of ways that are ways and practices and focuses that are really just about healing yourself and strengthening yourself and fortifying yourself so that you can do the journey ahead. You can move forward. And so that became a focus for many years. And spells and things, of course, were always there. That those are I kind of joke around and say that if it weren't for those things, especially in college, like I don't know how I'd have gotten through. um Sometimes you need a quick money spell when you're a bartender or whatever. And so all of that was big part of my craft. But I wouldn't say for a long time I really just focused on this idea of the spirit and what was going on with the spirit. And really my work as a medium. So when we talk about this with people, I always have to kind of preface this with saying that my root as a witch really does come from my experiences as a psychic medium. And witchcraft is it saved my life on multiple occasions. I firmly believe that. It got me out of some really tough situations as a child, as a young person, which was, fantastic. And I am very proud to be a witch and very proud of where I've come from, and I'm 36 years old now, and I have a great marriage and I've got this great life and I write books now and it's really amazing. But I come from a very impoverished area, and a place where there's a lot of drug abuse and things like that. And so, for me, witchcraft, like I often say it saved my life, but it really truly did. It kept me It was my anti-drug, as they say.
Okay,
When I
that's
was a
great.
kid, that was the thing. What's your
I
anti-drug?
mean,
Witchcraft was my anti-drug.
well, no, no, it's great. And so, do you care to tell us a little bit more specifically about how it saved your life? And the reason I
Yeah.
ask, you don't have to get into all the details, but I really, again, I want to let people know there's a lot of different ways. I mean, we've gotten very sophisticated in our understanding of the craft, but I want
Hmm.
to dispel any creepiness around this practice. And so I'd like to
Yeah.
hear a little bit more about this.
Sure. So for me, like I said, I come from a very impoverished area. I come from Brown County, Ohio, which we jokingly refer to as like the armpit of America. Um, and the opioid epidemic is a very big deal in the area. Methamphetamines and meth and so all of that was a very, very big deal when I was growing up. And a lot of the people that I graduated with either died or they're in jail from meth and drug related
Oh,
stuff.
that's hard.
And it just, and it's, it was kind of endemic to the area. And for as many people were strong enough to get through and find strength because they were part of a church, my experiences because I was a medium going to church weren't the greatest. And
Okay.
so I was going to the Pentecostal church, and I was doing all of the things and trying to be a good boy and stay on the straight and narrow, as they say. And one day I was overwhelmed with what I was experiencing as a psychic. And I eventually just broke down and went to my minister. I said, "Hey, this is what's going on. These are the dreams I'm getting, and this is the stuff that I see." And it wasn't just like flashes and stuff. It was verifiable information. Like I'd get names and I'd get weird pictures of people's hands that gave weird details away and things that just kids, you know, shouldn't come across or wouldn't have come across. And it was very disturbing for me. And I went to my minister. My minister did not handle it well. He said I was possessed and that I was going to infect the rest of the youth group. And so I was yanked out, and they performed an exorcism on me without
Oh
my
no.
parents' consent, which
Oh
was another whole
no.
other thing.
Oh my God.
And so, I was this young man who was just kind of in a spiritually vulnerable, kind of traumatic space. And I was also dealing with, my sexuality. I'm a gay man, and so that was also kind of all there at the same time. And I already felt that dissonance there with that issue and my relationship to my church at the time. But this was betrayal. It felt it was horrible. It was, and I look back on it now as an adult and I'm like, holy moly, like that was insane. But very, very traumatic experience, and so having this circle of men come up around me and holding hands and praying and yelling and it's crying, and it was very traumatic. And I I had one of those awkward moments where I started to giggle because it was so awkward and it was so weird. And these poor men, I mean, they must have thought I really was possessed and I really, really was something wrong. But it was just so awkward. I couldn't do anything else but just start to giggle. And so that was the beginning of the end, I think, in a lot. So I went on this. I had already been dabbling in things at this time. I didn't tell my minister that, but I had already found that people who I was meeting and the witches I was coming across were actually pretty cool people. Like they didn't care that I was gay. They didn't care, and we didn't talk about it. It wasn't a subject of or a focus at all. And in general, there was this idea that witches were people who were equipped to handle some of the darker things in life. Like we had faced some of those things, and we were able to help other people face them. But also that witchcraft was kind of here for the underdog. So if you were somebody in a situation where the scales were kind of tipped against you, you could use witchcraft to help balance the scales. And historically, that's what witchcraft is used for. I mean, no matter where you're looking at, that's kind of the story. So I just fell in love with it, and I found myself being able to protect myself. I was in a abusive situation when I was a child when with one of my parents, and witchcraft definitely saved me and protected me, and got me through some of the hardest parts of that. Again, being in an environment where there was a lot of drug abuse and things like that, there was a lot of influence, and it never was something that broke through the barrier. Again, protection and balance and cleansing was a really important thing for me.
Okay.
And then as I got older and I started to be able to work and make money and try to figure out what my career was going to be and all this other stuff, witchcraft started to become an important element in how I would plan my life out. I would use witchcraft to understand things that were going to come down the road, through acts of divination. And I would work with spirits that I've befriended over the years. All kinds of spirits. I've got all kinds of good friends, and so working with the spirits over the year to teach me what I need to do in this life to be a better person and to help the world in the ways that I can. But also, the really personal stuff, like to teach me how to be a better roommate, because I'm kind of sloppy. Teach me how to be a better business person when I own a small business. And so that's a big important thing. It's how I pay my bills. And I'm not naturally necessarily inclined for math and things like that all the time. So, when I say it saved my life, I say that because I've gotten through very physically dangerous situations as a result of my witchcraft. I've gotten through spiritually dangerous situations that had nothing to do with the occult, that were actually coming from, what we would consider usually pretty good, positive sources, like my church.
Right.
And then as just like, as a regular person, I find that there's a freedom to explore and ask questions about the big stuff that keeps us all up at night, about like, why are we here and
Mhm.
why are we doing this stuff and why do we care about the things we care about, and if the world's all just gonna be eaten by the sun one day, all of those things that we dare not speak. Witchcraft says, hey, go ask those questions and then get the answers so that they don't take your power away anymore. And I just can't imagine my life without that component especially at this point.
I can relate, and that is a beautiful testimonial. Thank you. Thanks for sharing that on a lot of levels. And listen, I hear these stories from other guests as well, that there was a turning point. That, I mean, when you were there having an exorcism performed on you as a young man, that could have really spiraled you into some negativity or worse. I mean, that's just putting it in a light, trite word. So, I mean, again, there's some groundedness that goes on here,
Mm-hmm.
with this practice, and which brings us to tools, right? So, I wanted to well, let's start with your new book, your latest book, soon to be released as we record in October of 2022, Crystal Magic for the Modern Witch, and clearly you are modern. So, um, Devin, I mean, crystals are used in many different ways, and there's always an association with New Age with crystals. And
Mm-hmm.
I know I was in New York City in the 80s, and there were lots of New Age stores, and there were lots of
Mm-hmm.
crystals that happened at that point. So I'd love to ask you, because a lot of times various forms of practice with witchcraft, I mean, obviously there's different types, but it's a long, deep rooted tradition from years and years and years. So perhaps European, right? I mean, obviously, witchcraft comes from all over the world. But let's just, I would like to, but where I'm going with this question is that I'd like to ask, do you think that crystals have always been part of a practice, or is this something that's a bit more modern?
Ooh, that's a good question because it's both actually.
Yeah.
So,
Hmm.
humanity has a very long, long, long history with crystals, and understanding that crystals were used for all sorts of things, from jewelry and adornment to money systems and payment and bartering and things like that. So crystals have always had wealth and worth kind of associated with them, no matter what age or era they were at. And so just in general, people, which you'll find if a gemstone is mentioned in something, especially if it's old, I think there's a couple of things in like from Egypt that we see, and there's a couple of things from Greece that we see that are like pretty old. But it's really referencing stones in relation to wealth in some kind of way.
Okay.
So
Yeah.
the way that we understand crystals now, where we've got, you got all these books like mine that give you all of this list of correspondences and it tells you what the crystal's good for. That's totally new. That has only been around for, I want to say, about 50 years. Somebody's probably going to correct me, but I want to say about 50, 60 years. It's not a, it's it, the New Age movement always embraced crystals, but that was because the New Age movement reached into the East, and crystals and minerals and gemstones were better understood, quite frankly, in the East at that time.
Uh-huh.
And we were influenced by those things, and we bring them over, like chakras and yoga and all
True.
of those other things.
Right.
And when we get a hold of them, we here in the West, especially the people who are spiritual and kind of freelance spiritualists like me, we're really obsessed with formulas, and we're really obsessed with things fitting into categories. And so what we get is this huge, beautiful, rich practice that's associated with crystals. But with the New Age movement, a lot of the times the crystals were presented as kind of something that were easy to access or easy to get a hold of, and that's not necessarily the case. Even going to rock shops, you still won't necessarily find every crystal that's in a book. In fact, you probably won't find every crystal that's in the
Right.
reference book you're looking for. So it's kind of it's a newer thing, and in the grand scheme of things, in the grand story, it is a newer thing. But crystals have always been with us.
Yeah, in their various forms. So that's interesting, and I it's funny, when I was kind of making note that I wanted to ask you that question, I thought, well, there were crystal balls that were often associated with divination. So, and
Mm-hmm.
that seems like that is an older practice, and it could also just be that people we're
Mm-hmm.
traveling more, so we're able to access stones from South America or Asia or something like that, versus centuries ago less so.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And but let's
Well,
go
we
back
can
to
make
the
crystals
crystal.
too.
Pardon me?
So we can make crystals now too. So
Ah.
like a lot of crystal balls are crystal in the Swarovski crystal kind of way,
Oh, right.
like your nice fancy crystal. And so it's glass that has a really high lead content in it, which gives it that super clarity and allows light to pass through it. And those are excellent. That's actually what you want for scrying and for crystal ball gazing and things that you want. For the most part, you want that nice clear surface that's going to let you kind of just fall into it. Whereas crystal balls, if you get a quartz crystal ball that isn't reconstituted or clarified, then you're going to have a whole other experience, which is great, and I love it. But yeah, so a lot of the time when people talk about crystal balls, they're actually talking about a crystal, like Swarovski crystal ball. Just just so we know.
Okay, that's good. Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. So I don't know if you'd like to comment on scrying and using. I mean, that gets very specific in our use of crystals, but how do we do that? I mean,
Yeah, so it's surprisingly easy, and I
okay.
think people make it a little too complicated, or they're expecting something like grandiose to happen, and it just doesn't happen that way. So there's two main approaches to it. The first is that, first and foremost, you want to kind of get rid of as much light as you possibly can in the room that you're in,
Uh,
and the reason being that light is going to catch on the stone and then reflect back to you. So you want to have as little as that as possible, and then maybe one candle that's kind of situated maybe behind the crystal ball or over off to the side, just so that there is light coming in that you can do something with. And the idea, actually, the best way it was ever explained to me was that you want to look not at the surface of the stone, but you want to try to look at the center of the stone, or at the center of the sphere. And once you can kind of get your gaze fixed there, and a very disillusioning kind of way, where you just kind of check out a little bit,
okay.
you focus on that, and you do your breath work or whatever it is that's going to help get you into the kind of a light trance state. And then in that space, you wait to see what your mind does. So you wait to see, do you see something in your mind? And is it a memory, or is it a flash of a color, or something along those lines? So that's the first method. The second method is my favorite method, and it involves a little bit more brain power, but you get set up just like before. So you've got the crystal ball in front of you, and then maybe a candle behind it, and you are going to gaze into the stone, but you're going to imagine that there is a TV screen inside of the stone. And that's a really easy thing for us to do. We know what a TV screen looks like, right? So you put a TV screen, and the anticipation, of course, whenever you see a TV screen in your mind or you're projecting it into something like a stone, is that there's going to be action on the TV screen. So it actually prompts the subconscious to start allowing images to start rolling on the screen. And most of my experiences with this is it starts off on the screen disappears, and then there's like people dancing inside of the crystal ball, or something along those lines. But you use that connection with your subconscious, again, understanding what a TV is and what a TV is going to do, and you use that to trigger the phenomena. And so that tends to be my favorite way of doing like crystal ball gazing.
Great. I appreciate that. That's a cool explanation. Now, does it need to be round?
No, but it helps.
Okay.
There's definitely something to the spherical shape, and there's a whole lot to it, and we can break it in. I mean, anybody who's into numbers and the spiritual side of math and stuff like that,
Yeah.
we all know how important spheres are and circles are. So all of that applies, right? But however, you can very easily just as much scry into wallpaper. I mean, realistically, you can do the same kind of thing. You're looking into the pattern and just letting it kind of do its thing. So it doesn't need to be any shape. It doesn't need to be any size. The best tends to be a crystal ball. That tends to be the most efficient. But really, whatever you got, works. You can also, if you only have a couple of tumble stones, let's say, you can fill up a bowl of water. You can put your tumbled stones in the bottom of the water, and then you scry into it just the same, and you let the water amplify that experience and help facilitate that experience.
Wonderful. Okay, that's really great. I think that it's interesting to look at different types of crystals, and I'd like to demystify it for people in terms of just, I mean, obviously a crystal ball would be wonderful to have, but definitely go with crystals, right, that just hold a lure, correct? I mean, it doesn't necessarily have to be a checklist of you are supposed to have these types to really get, be officially a crystal healing practitioner or something like that. You really can just go initially for your practice and your use. You can just find ones that feel good, correct?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, yeah.
I
mean, there's a reason you're attracted to it.
Yeah, right, exactly. I have an anecdote with a piece of really nice hunk of fluorite, purple color, and some sides are smooth, other sides are faceted. You could see it just picks up the light in different ways, and I'm playing around with it, and it's about the size of maybe a baseball, and it was so great to look at it from this side and that side and this side and that side, and then before I knew it, as I was playing and catching the light on it, I'm like, wow, I'm actually kind of falling into this. I was having a meditative experience without trying to do it. I just was enjoying it. I just was enjoying how beautiful it was. And so again, I'd like to look at it as we don't have to be too formal in the way that these tools can work for us.
No, not at all. Yeah.
So,
and I often find that they're trying to communicate with us all the time. We're just not. We're too busy listening. Often la la land to pay attention to what they're trying to tell us. And so any of those moments where you just can take a moment, take a breath, look at your stone, see what's going on inside of your own mind, see what's happening in your own subconscious. I think a lot of my favorite thing to say about stones is that they are supplemental energy to the energy body, and the way that vitamins are supplemental energy for the physical body. And so just as much as you want to, make sure that your physical body was responding well to the vitamins or the supplements that you're taking, you want to do the same thing with stones. And so you want to be in that space of asking yourself, how do I feel as a result of carrying this with me? As my mind, my mental state changed, especially if you're somebody who deals with depression or anxiety, working with stones that are going to help bring balance to those things are important, right? But not every stone's going to work with you the same way. So really keeping an eye on those things and listening are the most important. I mean, I think that's with anything in spirituality, is listening and paying attention and being mindful. And if you are those things, you can navigate just about anything with pretty good grace.
That's great. Like you said at the beginning, anything can be a tool, but it's great to have them because, I don't know, crystals they feel good. And so tell us a little bit more about your book, because it's a big one. I mean, it's a great looking tome. And what makes yours distinctive from other books on crystals, Devin?
Yeah, I said I would never write a book on crystals. Because I love crystals. I've been collecting crystals since I was a wee little boy. And I I thought it's all been written, and I had, I've studied with the best, and I've have some contemporaries and peers of mine who just are mind-blowing practitioners that I feel constantly made a student by, right? And so I said, oh no, I would never do this. But I owned a crystal shop that had been open for 30 years,
Fabulous.
and I was teaching workshops and things on crystals, and it was just everybody was like, well, you're writing these other books, why aren't you writing this book, why aren't you doing this? And I had this resistance to it, and mostly because I love it so much. I love the mineral kingdom so much, not just from a metaphysical standpoint, but also I'm a big science nerd.
Hmm.
And so I love the science behind how a crystal is formed and what's going on with geology, and all of that is just fascinating to me. So I was nervous. It was a nervousness of, am I going to do this right? And do I have anything new to say? Because that's my other thing as a writer, and as an author, is I I grew up with a lot of books that just said the same thing, just in maybe a slightly different way. And which is great, because we all need different interpretations so that people can get the message. There's nothing wrong with that. But for me, I very much set a kind of a bar, and I said, well, if I'm not going to add to this discussion, then I don't want to write about it. And so I want to, I look at myself as the steward of this current spiritual vibration. I'm going to pass it on to other people. They're going to have the discussion next, right? So if I'm not going to add to that as I'm passing it along, what's the point? Because then we're just playing telephone, right? The message gets thinner. So I wanted to make sure that if I was going to do this, I was going to do something new. And so when I sat down and realized that I actually did have some new stuff, and there were some stuff that I wanted to talk about, and I'd been talking about with students for a couple of years that I didn't ever see in books, like working with the dragon spirit in a crystal. And what we mean by dragon spirit is, if you think of ley lines, which we know are all over the planet, crystals often grow in ley lines. So the veins of crystals can be found on ley lines, and dragon energy moves through ley lines. So there's a natural connection there with ley lines, crystals, and dragons. It's right there in front of us. And so for me, it was really important to bring that up, to talk about that. Because we often think of my allergies are going crazy today. I'm sorry, I keep itching my nose. But we have this history with devas and angels often be associated to crystals as the spiritual consciousness or energies behind them. I think that's because we went to the East and we pulled things and we didn't quite understand. And so a lot of the times angels and devas are kind of conflated and mixed up. But we also have this other energy that's there. That's a very fierce, fiery, earthy, deep within kind of energy that is not the light energy that we feel and we often observe with crystals, because they're absorbing light or they're reflecting light. Light has a lot to do with crystals and crystal energy, but there's also this other aspect to it. So I wanted to write that. I wanted to share some of that. I also had divination systems and things that I developed over the years working with stones. And I wanted to make sure that could be flushed out and fully presented. And so as I was sitting down and I had at least these two ideas, that I was like, well, these are new. This is going to be some good stuff. I started looking around and realizing that I had this amazing collection, because I've been collecting since I was a little boy, and I owned a crystal shop. And so I have this fantastic collection of stones. I'm kind of a dragon myself. I hoard this is my hoard, right? These stones and all my rare plants. I'm hoarding them. And so I realized, I'm like, well, I have to take pictures of these beautiful, beautiful things, or else, like, I have to share this. So I had already done the photography for my last book, and it was a fun way for me as an artistic person to bridge my writing and my love of visual art. And so when the challenge came up to do the photos for a crystal book, it was game on. And it's very difficult to take crystal photos. People do
I
not
bet.
realize how difficult it really is. But they reflect light, and they'll reflect light from anything, and it's a whole thing. And so it took 2.5 years, I want to say, to do all the photos
Oh, wow.
and from start to finish and to get it all wrapped up. So it was a very long process. There was a lot of love, there was a lot of spirit, and a lot of intention definitely went into this book.
And so is it
With
mostly your collection that are in the
It's all
books?
my collection.
Oh,
It's all my
Devin, that's
collection.
amazing.
They're all my stones. It's all my photography. It's all my own words. It's a whole. It's a love letter to the Crystal Kingdom.
Right,
You
that
know.
have been
Yeah.
your pet rocks all this time.
Yeah.
But no, and beyond. Now that is it's
Yeah.
great and very interesting as far as the photography of it. It feels like, you almost had to negotiate with the stone, like, let me capture you in this
Hmm.
medium. So
Oh, I had lots of conversations. My neighbors thought I was off my rocker. I would sit there, yeah, we need this to happen. Quit doing that, and I'm yelling at the table, and it's just this rock, and my neighbors love me.
bravo.
But
Yeah, exactly.
yeah.
No, and that's what's so great about your story is that you have found your community that welcomes you and just, allows you to be your brightest and most assured self as you share this and help us all get smarter out there. So again, Devin Hunter's book, Crystal Magic for the Modern Witch, out on Llewellyn. And I noted a couple of your other titles.
Mhm.
Uh, let's see, which one do I want to ask about first? Um, I guess Spirits. Which book was that? Which one was first? What was your first book that you put
So
out?
the first book was The Witch's Book of Power.
Okay, so we'll start with that one actually.
Yeah. So that the first three books are actually a part of a whole series,
Okay.
and that we call the Witch Power series. And the idea with this was that at at the time I was invited to come to Llewellyn and be an author, which was an amazing experience. And as I was working out exactly what I was going to write for them and how we were going to do that, I had actually pitched what became Modern Witch, which is my fourth book, to them, and they were like, "Well, you're very sweet, but that would be very expensive to do, and so why don't you do something else, and then we can work on this really expensive project, maybe if this goes well."
Okay.
So I sat down. I was like, well, I don't know what I would do, but I had been teaching this class for years, and it was just perfect. It was perfect to put into a book form. And the trick with it, though, was that the Witch Power series is not written necessarily for somebody who is brand new to witchcraft. If you were coming to witchcraft looking for spirituality, if you were coming to witchcraft looking for answers, then yes, that's a book for you. But if you're just wanting to dabble in witchcraft, you probably are going to look at that book and at all of the books and just kind of be a little overwhelmed, because I instantly talk about big topics, and I instantly talk about deep witchcraft lore and how it fits into modern world, and all of the things that it's usually people who are advanced or more in an intermediate kind of level are going to be looking at. And so the whole series was written for people who had practiced witchcraft at one point in time in their life. They moved on, or they hit a spiritual plateau where they just didn't have a lot of activity in forward motion. And they still identified as witches or witchy, but they needed a root. They needed something to dig into to enliven that practice again. And I took a very non-denominational approach as best I could, and tried to create a series of books that was intermediate to advanced, that helped people who were already familiar with topics in metaphysics and already familiar with topics in even in witchcraft to some extent, which honestly most of the metaphysics we just call witchcraft these days.
Hmm.
And so a lot of those basic things are all there. We all know what crystals are and chakras and things like that. Then you can come to my book. And so that's the first three books are a series that are very, very deep, very in depth. And it's a guide that takes you from understanding yourself as an individual and where your power is and how to overcome systems of disempowerment, and how to rise above those things, being spiritually whole, with the main focus at the end of the day. The Witch's Book of Spirits, which is the second book, takes that same idea, but we put it into the world of spirits and looking at this concept that we are surrounded by spirits. And I'm an animist as well, so I believe very much that there's an indwelling spirit in everything. And so we approach witchcraft and self-sovereignty and that spiritual evolution from the position of you are a spirit interacting with all of these other spirits. How do you do that? And so that gets pretty deep, and there's a whole bunch of channeled material in the back that I've been very honored to find out people are doing their own things with. Like, I found out a guy created his own religion off of my second book, which is totally interesting and not at all what I had intended, but that's cool if that's for you. And then we go into Witch's Book of Mysteries, which is the third book in that series, and that is when we go to the big demiurge. We go to creator, and we take that work that is about ascension, and I have my own form of a Merkaba that working that we do, and we bring the light and the dark halves together in ourselves, and we go meet to the creator spirit. And there's a whole bunch of other stuff. We talk to the guardian spirits of space, time, matter, energy, and what we refer to as quintessence. And so it's big, heavy work. It's big, deep, personal. You're going to go talk to creator and ask those questions that have plagued you. Go seek the healing that you need in the way that you need. And so that's that first series. But I wrote these books, and I love them, and they're very intense, and they made me a bestseller, which was amazing and incredible, and I'm so grateful.
Yes.
But then I had a student say, well, but you don't teach us how to cast spells. Like, you teach us how to do all this other stuff, which is great, but you're not teaching us how to cast spells. And I was like, I guess if you're practicing witchcraft, you probably want to learn how to cast spells, right? Okay. So that's where Modern Witch officially came in, and that's the photos, and that's the spell book.
Fantastic. Well, this is really, really great. And I know, I think it's great that you went through the first three books in a way. There's a lot of philosophy in there for people to really approach their practice holistically, right? With a different level of reverence. I think that's great. But then now you're giving us more on tools. And I do want to ask you in our final moments, it's funny when we were talking about crystals in being used in witchcraft, and you were saying that it's relatively recent. And what do you think was being used before?
Well, so it kind of depends, right? So witchcraft looks different all over the world. And what people don't know is that witchcraft was like, we have this kind of image that like Rome fell and then suddenly Catholicism took over and witchcraft was banned. Witchcraft had been banned way earlier than that in the Western world. And so because the difference being that, yes, a lot of people went and worshipped these multiple gods, but they did it to placate them and make the gods go away. Witches and sorcerers were the ones that made the gods come to them. And that was a very weird situation and an awkward thing for people. So it really, yes, there were sacred things, but a lot of the times it was things like resins, like frankincense, myrrh, even sometimes oils, but like spices were a much more important thing in magic in the old world than they are today necessarily. Now today we've got all of these different things. But so yes, those things were there, but crystals were so expensive that most people didn't have access to them. I mean, just to be honest with you.
Right.
So it's only been recently because of mining and things like that we have this access to all these stones, but it didn't exist before.
Yeah, that's good. And also plants, right? So, I mean, you mentioned the oils and the resins, which are some of which would be, derived from that. But it's really great to think about. And there's so many things that I still want to know, but I guess we're all just going to have to read your book, Devin, all your books, along the way. So thank you so much for talking to us. It was really enlightening. And I will date this this little interview by saying, Blessed Samhain. We've got some good energies afoot. So I'm really glad I got to talk to you kind of during this magical time. And I feel very inspired. Thank you.
Oh, thanks for having me. Thanks for the space.
Until the next time. Namaste. So thanks for watching, everybody. This has been Truth Be Told Transformation. I'm here to talk to people who have really mastered their different skills to help us all find higher consciousness and live a better life. I hope that you'll be sure to tune in to see Tony Sweet every Friday live at 3 p.m. Pacific for Truth Be Told. And I have a new show every Wednesday. So thanks for watching. Please share and follow and like and all those other good things you can do to spread the word. Until the next time, namaste.